Carlos, I want to first get you to respond to Javier Salazar, the sheriff of Bexar County, Texas, saying that Trump made the job harder on the border. Play cut 115.
When Donald Trump comes down to Texas, stands next to officers in uniforms just like mine, he's not there to help us. Don't think that. Not for a second. He is a self-serving man. I mean, look, just like when he killed the border bill, he just made our jobs harder. Now, Kamala, on the other hand, has been fighting border crime for years. She's gone down to Mexico and worked to stop the traffickers. And when the traffickers didn't stop, she put them in jail. Now, down in my neck of the woods, we call that fooling around and finding out. I may be paraphrasing a bit.
Ambassador, your reaction?
Well, I think they can't defend their track record. When you talk about over 10 million people entering this country illegally over the last 3.5 years, those 10 million people are more than 40 states, the population in 40 states. When you talk about a border czar who hasn't been to the border, a border czar who hasn't spent any time in Mexico, a border czar who's never visited El Salvador, a border czar who hasn't been to Guatemala or Honduras in the last 2.5 years, a border czar who proposed cutting $220 million for ICE enforcement actions in 2019 as a United States senator. These are her policies. What's really interesting is how she's abandoning them. Once the darling of the progressive left, a person who believed in sanctuary cities and sanctuary for all, a person who never believed in borders, has quickly changed her political colors because of expediency. And I think it's really important for the press and for the American public to hold her responsible. Who is she? The lack of sincerity is really concerning.
So the same sheriff said this in cut 151.
53 people died after being found inside that trailer in San Antonio in what one federal agent called the worst human smuggling incident in U.S. history. We've now learned that 4 people have been arrested and charged in this case. The sheriff is now pleading with President Biden for assistance. He has written this in a letter. I'm angry, Mr. President. I'm angry that I could not stop this massive loss of life in my county. I'm angry that despite my best efforts to appeal to your administration, I have not received a response.
This is the same guy, Ambassador. I mean, is he being blackmailed, paid off? What's going on here?
Well, I think they just lack credibility, right? Rather than being a law enforcement professional, like many of the great people who serve this country are, they're politicians. You can't be a true law enforcement professional and support a person who champions defund the police, a person who champions eliminating support for ICE agents and Customs and Border Patrol, a person who champions local law enforcement not cooperating with federal officials in order to have a streamlined process for deporting people who have come to this country, committed crimes, and are on their way out. It's really, really sad a person to, like Mr. Salazar, to pick politics over being a professional.
So I thought that Kamala Harris was not in charge of the border. And so help me understand, if the rank and file, Customs and Border Patrol, the Border Patrol Union, which candidate do they prefer, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump?
Donald Trump. Donald Trump has always supported him. And one of the perfect examples is villainizing these agents. And one of the great examples of the media manipulation was Customs and Border Patrol. You have these agents on horses with whips. The whips were there to protect the horses and to move the horses away and to actually protect the migrants and move them away from the migrants. The media and the leftist liberals who run this country are all glorifying this. Look at these Border Patrol agents whipping these poor Haitian migrants. They do an entire investigation. They demonize these individuals. The Office of the Inspector General comes out and says that that's not what they were doing. When they try to cut their benefits, when they try to cut their pay, when they're constantly attacking them, when they scream in the streets, defund ICE, eliminate ICE, let's replace ICE. How do you think that makes these agents feel? How do you think it makes their families feel? That these are people that are risking their lives in order to make our country, and they're constantly being villainized by their political elected leaders.
So let's transition to Venezuela here. Kamala's economic policies eerily mirror that we've seen in Venezuela, with price controls and government force, price fixing, free stuff socialism, attacking and villainizing corporations. You know a lot about South America. Please help educate our audience, Ambassador.
Well, President Milei in Argentina said it best. He said if printing money would end poverty, then printing diplomas would end stupidity. You can't tax your way to prosperity. You can't spend your way to prosperity. This idea that all the underlying currents of the economy that drive inflation, this out-of-control government spending, the out-of-control entitlements, the lack of economic growth, the elimination of our energy independence that led to this massive inflation. How are we going to control it? By putting controls on the price, right? So we're going to put control on prices that consumers pay, which will never work, which led to the collapse of Venezuela, which led to the collapse of my parents' native country of Cuba, and which has led to the mass migration of these people coming to the United States searching for a better life.
So the other part of this is the missing children. So the missing children on the southern border, how many children have gone missing under the Kamala Harris border management that we know of?
At a minimum, it's 320,000, and that doesn't include what they qualify as gotaways.
Wait, 320,000. So just help me understand. I don't mean to interrupt. So 320,000 kids that came across the border that we have no idea where they now are. Is that correct?
They're completely unidentified. We were really concerned about children in cages, and the media was very concerned about children in cages, a program that was started under President Barack Obama. But we're not concerned about 320,000 children in this country who are currently being sexually exploited and sold into human trafficking.
But so 320,000, how do we even know that's the correct number? How do we know it's not 600,000? What are the median ages of these children?
So they're all minors. This is their numbers. The 320,000 is their numbers. And as I said, it doesn't include what they classify as gotaways. These are people who never had an encounter with any of the border and protection services. So we know the number at a baseline is 320,000. It's obviously significantly more. And these are all children that are minors under 18 years old who are in this country without any sort of adult protection and who are right now probably being sexually and physically exploited across this country. So it's the largest human trafficking operation probably in the history of the United States.
I mean, that's slavery, isn't it?
It is modern slavery. And it's not only those children, it's also the women. They don't speak a lot about these women, but a lot of these women that come over are sold obviously into sex rings, or sold into prostitution, they're sold into forced labor. A lot of these children that are coming over aren't even coming over with their parents. They're being traded and smuggled and brought across our southern borders. And ultimately, unfortunately for many of them, it ends with the loss of their life. So a party that claims to be, as the Democrats do, a party of opportunity, a party of women, a party of choice, is really through their failed policies leading to one of the biggest humanitarian crises that our country has ever experienced.
So it's 380,000. Let's just say that not all of them are being sold into quote unquote slavery, but 320,000. So is it possible 100,000 minors are currently being used as sex and labor slaves?
I think the number is much, much higher than that. These children don't. So the way the coyotes work, the coyotes charge. They charge their fee, right? They charge their bounty to bring you across the southern border. If you don't have that bounty, if you don't have the $10,000, the $8,000, the $12,000, you have to work it off. If you're a single woman or a child, how would you pay back $10,000 or $12,000 coming into this country illegally? The only asset they have to sell, unfortunately, is it's their bodies, it's their souls, and that's what's happening with these children. That's what's happening with these women. And the cartels, unfortunately, take that money to go back into these countries to further weaken institutions, to further drive more illegal migration into our country.
Yeah, I mean, I was recently on the Young Turks network, and Cenk on there was like, we as Democrats, we care about all people. We care about all humanity. Ambassador, what you're describing is the most graphic, grotesque slave operation we've seen maybe ever in history. 30 seconds remaining, Ambassador.
It's absolute carnage. And if they really care for humanity, if they really, really do, they should fly down to Panama to the Darien Gap. That's where most migrants are coming from Central America. Rent a car and drive all the way to Mexico. And you will see children and women abandoned on the side of the road like runaway dogs. It is absolutely heartbreaking. So if they really, really care about these children, about these women, about the families who are struggling with fentanyl addiction and fentanyl death in our country, they should really take this seriously and do something about it. And stop placating now when election season comes that they're the party of border security.
But they don't care. And instead, millions of American women are going to vote just for abortion, even though there's over 300,000 kids and potentially tens of thousands of sex slaves brought to you by Kamala Harris.